The antique grandfather clock in our hallway chimed 9 times as I stared at my phone in disbelief. Another text from David. Working late again, don't wait up. On our 25th wedding anniversary, the reservation at Riverside, the restaurant, where he proposed, had been made 3 months in advance. My carefully chosen dress hung on the closet door, unworn. The champagne chilled in its bucket, soon to be as flat as my spirits. I walked to his study, running my fingers along the glass display cases that housed his precious vintage watch collection. 43 timepieces, each with their own story that David loved to tell at dinner parties. The Omega Speedmaster that matched the one worn on the moon. The 1956 Rolex Submariner he'd tracked down for years. The Patek Philippe his father had given him, each one meticulously maintained, documented, and insured. I opened his laptop, something I rarely did. Our marriage had always been built on trust, but the alert from our joint bank account earlier that day had gnawed at me, a $47,000 withdrawal. Nearly half of what remained in our retirement savings after the previous 3 similar withdrawals over the past 4 months. What I found wasn't just a betrayal of our marriage vows. It was the systematic dismantling of our future. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The emails were organized in a folder labeled Property Investment. Inside were conversations with a real estate agent about a waterfront condo in Seattle, receipts for designer furniture, and dozens of intimate messages to someone named Amber. "Can't wait to see you in our new place," he had written just yesterday. "Once the divorce papers are filed, we can finally stop hiding." Divorce papers, our new place. The words blurred as tears welled in my eyes. I'm Sarah Mitchell. For 25 years, I'd been the supportive wife of David Mitchell, financial advisor to Portland's elite. I'd abandoned my interior design studies when we married, instead focusing on creating the perfect home and social network to support his career. I'd planned the dinner parties, remembered the birthdays of his clients' children, and cultivated the image of the ideal couple living the American dream in our Lake Oswego craftsman. Now, at 53, I faced a future I'd never imagined. David had siphoned away nearly $200,000 of our retirement savings to create a new life with a woman young enough to be our daughter. The remaining funds wouldn't sustain me for long, especially since our house still carried a mortgage refinance to pay for David's ever-growing watch collection. I closed the laptop and poured myself a glass of the anniversary champagne. As I sipped it alone in our kitchen, my gaze drifted to the watch cases gleaming under their display lights. David valued those timepieces more than anything, certainly more than our marriage. Each one represented not just its monetary worth, but the pride he took in owning something rare and coveted. The Patek Philippe annual calendar caught the light, its moon phase complication showing a perfect crescent. Estimated value, $42,000. The vintage Cartier tank, $35,000. The limited edition Vacheron Constantin that had been his most recent acquisition, nearly $60,000. I took another sip of champagne as a strange calm settled over me. David was flying to Chicago tomorrow for a 3-day financial conference, one he attended every year. I knew from his emails that Amber would be meeting him there. They'd booked a suite at the Peninsula, charged to our joint credit card. 3 days. That would be enough time. I called Megan, my best friend since college, and the only person who'd noticed how distant I'd become as my marriage crumbled. "Can you come over? I need to talk, and I need a witness." When Megan arrived, I showed her everything. The emails, the bank withdrawals, the plans for the Seattle love nest that had eaten our retirement savings. Her initial shock gave way to a fury I'd never seen in my normally gentle friend. "That bastard," she whispered, scrolling through the evidence. "All these years you've supported him, and this is how he repays you?" She looked up, her expression softening. What are you going to do? I pointed to the watch collection. I'm going to secure my future. The next morning, I drove David to the airport before dawn. He kissed me absently on the cheek as he got out of the car. I'll bring you back something nice from Chicago, he promised, the same thing he said before every business trip. Don't worry about it, I replied, smiling. I've got some projects planned that will keep me busy until you're back. As his plane took off, I called Thomas Wilson, an art and collectibles dealer in Portland's Pearl District. Years ago, at one of our dinner parties, he'd slipped David his card after admiring the watches. If you ever decide to sell any pieces, call me first, he'd said. David had laughed. He was a collector, not a seller. Thomas remembered me immediately. Mrs. Mitchell, how wonderful to hear from you. How can I help? David has decided to liquidate his watch collection, I said, keeping my voice steady. All of it. He's authorized me to handle the transaction while he's at a conference. There was a brief pause. All of it? That's surprising. His collection is quite significant. He's moving into a different investment strategy, I replied, the half-truth bitter on my tongue. We need the funds consolidated quickly. He mentioned you specifically. Thomas's professional interest overcame any hesitation. I'd be happy to come by this afternoon to assess the collection. While waiting for Thomas, I gathered all the documentation for each watch: certificates of authenticity, service records, original boxes, and papers. David kept everything meticulously organized, a trait I'd once admired and now found convenient. I also located the insurance policy that listed each piece with its appraised value. I texted Megan, "He's coming at 2. Please be here." Thomas arrived exactly on time, dressed impeccably in a charcoal suit. His eyes widened when I led him to the study and unlocked the display cases. "Remarkable," he murmured, carefully examining each timepiece. "Some of these are extraordinarily rare." For the next 3 hours, Thomas documented the collection, occasionally making calls to collectors he knew would be interested in specific pieces. Megan sat quietly in the corner, her presence a silent support and witness. Mrs. Mitchell, based on current market conditions and the exceptional provenance of these pieces, I can offer $575,000 for the complete collection. Thomas looked up from his notes. I would need a few days to arrange the funds, of course. I need the transaction completed before David returns in 3 days, I said firmly. And I'll need a cashier's check. Thomas considered this. For a quick sale of this magnitude, the best I can do is $525,000, but I can have the funds for you by tomorrow afternoon. I extended my hand. We have a deal. After Thomas left, Megan hugged me tightly. Are you sure about this, Sarah? He's going to be furious. I nodded, a weight lifting from my shoulders. He's been planning to leave me with nothing. I'm just making sure that doesn't happen. The next morning, I opened a new bank account at a different bank under my name only. Then I visited Patricia Williams, an attorney recommended by Megan. After hearing my situation, Patricia's advice was clear. Technically, the watches are marital property, she explained. But so is the retirement account he's been depleting. Document everything: the account withdrawals, the evidence of the affair, the condo purchase. We'll need it all for the divorce proceedings. By afternoon, Thomas called to say the funds were ready. I drove to his gallery in the Pearl District, where he presented me with a cashier's check and transfer documentation for each piece. I signed everything with a steady hand, formally releasing the collection that had been David's pride for decades. If you don't mind me asking, Thomas said as he walked me to the door, what prompted such a sudden decision? Mr. Mitchell always seemed so passionate about his collection. I met his gaze evenly. Sometimes our passions change, Mr. Wilson. Sometimes we discover what's truly valuable before it's too late. I deposited the check into my new account and then drove to Cannon Beach. a place I'd always loved but rarely visited because David preferred more exclusive vacation destinations. I checked into a small oceanfront hotel and walked along the shore for hours, watching the waves crash against Haystack Rock as the sun set in brilliant oranges and pinks. For the first time in months, perhaps years, I felt like I could breathe. The constant anxiety that had become my companion had lifted. I had resources now. I had options. I had a future that wasn't tied to a man who had stopped valuing me long ago. That evening, sitting on my hotel balcony with the sound of the ocean in the background, I opened my laptop and pulled up the business plan I'd been secretly working on for months. Mitchell Interiors, a home staging and interior design company, focused on helping people showcase their properties for maximum value. I'd been studying online, reconnecting with my abandoned passion, preparing for a day I wasn't sure would ever come. Now that day was here. I made revisions to the plan with a new confidence, adjusting the startup capital figure to reflect my new resources. By midnight, I had a clear vision and timeline. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. By morning, I had a list of necessary steps, from business licensing to website development, from supply chain relationships to marketing strategies. I returned home the afternoon before David was due back. The empty display cases in his study stood as silent witnesses to the transformation that was about to unfold. I didn't try to hide what I'd done. Instead, I left the sales documentation on his desk, alongside printouts of his emails to Amber and the bank statements showing the retirement account withdrawals. Next to these, I placed a business card I'd designed and printed that morning. Sarah Mitchell, founder and principal designer, Mitchell Interiors. Below that, I left a note with just one line. I valued our past. I'm securing my future. Then I packed 2 suitcases with my clothes and personal belongings and moved into a furnished apartment I'd arranged to rent near the Pearl District. I left my wedding ring on top of the documents. David's plane landed at 8:47 p.m. I know this because he called me 17 times between 9:15 p.m., when he presumably arrived home, and midnight. I didn't answer. He left increasingly desperate, then angry, then threatening voicemails. Sarah, where are my watches? Call me immediately. What have you done? Do you have any idea how valuable those were? This is theft. I'll have you arrested for this. You'll never get away with this. I'm calling my lawyer tonight. I listened to each message once, then deleted it. The next morning, I met with Patricia again, officially retaining her as my divorce attorney. She reviewed the evidence I'd gathered and nodded approvingly. He doesn't have much ground to stand on, she assured me. He's depleted marital assets without your knowledge or consent. The watches were also marital property. At most, you might need to account for their value in the overall settlement, but given what he's done, we can make a strong case that you've simply protected your share of the assets. True to his threats, David's attorney contacted Patricia. That afternoon, what followed was 3 months of legal maneuvering, during which I focused on building Mitchell Interiors. I rented a small commercial space, created my website, and networked relentlessly with real estate agents throughout Portland. My first client was Ethan Parker, a developer converting old warehouses into luxury condos. He needed someone to stage the model unit for potential buyers. The project was high profile and risky for a new business, but I poured everything into creating a space that captured both luxury and the building's industrial heritage. The opening weekend, all 5 available units sold at asking price or above. Ethan immediately contracted me for his next 3 projects. While my business flourished, David's life unraveled. The Seattle condo deal fell through when he couldn't produce the remaining funds needed for closing. Amber, discovering that the lavish lifestyle he'd promised was suddenly in jeopardy, ended their relationship. Several of his clients, hearing rumors of his personal troubles, transferred their accounts to other advisors. 6 months after I sold the watch collection, we reached a divorce settlement. David would keep the house and its mortgage, his significantly reduced investment accounts, and his car. I retained my business, my new apartment, the funds from the watch sale, minus a small equalization payment, and my car. The remaining retirement funds were divided equally. On the day the divorce was finalized, I opened Mitchell Interior's first showroom in the Pearl District. The space showcased my design aesthetic and served as a meeting place for clients. Local media covered the opening, featuring my story as a midlife reinvention. I carefully avoided mentioning the details of my divorce, focusing instead on my rediscovered passion for design and helping people transition their living spaces. Homes tell our stories, I told the reporter from the Portland Business Journal. Sometimes those stories change, and our spaces need to reflect that. I help people honor their past while embracing their future. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was living that very philosophy. A year after selling David's watches, Mitchell Interiors had grown to a team of 6, with a reputation as Portland's premier home staging company. We had expanded into full interior design services and were booking projects 3 months in advance. My personal portfolio had recovered from the divorce, and I was on track to have a more secure retirement than I would have had with David. I rarely thought about my ex-husband until the day he walked into my showroom. He looked older, the confident financial advisor replaced by a man visibly carrying the weight of his choices. He stood awkwardly near the entrance, taking in the space that represented my success. "You've done well for yourself," he said finally. "Yes," I replied simply, neither inviting nor discouraging the conversation. "I never thought," he began, then stopped. "I underestimated you, Sarah. All those years I saw you as just my wife, not as someone capable of—" He gestured. "At the showroom." "That was your mistake," I said. "One of many." He nodded, accepting the rebuke. "The thing is, I'm selling the house. It's too big for just me, and honestly, I can't afford it anymore. Several realtors recommended your company. For staging, they said you're the best." I couldn't help but smile at the perfect symmetry of this moment. "We are the best. But I'm afraid we're fully booked for the next 3 months." David looked crestfallen. "I understand. I just thought—" "Lisa can take your information," I said, gesturing to my assistant. "We might have a cancellation, or I could recommend another company that might be available sooner." As he turned to speak with Lisa, I noticed he was wearing a simple Timex, a far cry from his once prized collection. I felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only a quiet appreciation for how completely our roles had reversed. That evening, as I closed the showroom, I found myself reflecting on the journey of the past year. The betrayal that had initially devastated me had ultimately forced me to rediscover my own value. The watches that had occupied so much space in our home had funded the business that now fulfilled me professionally and financially. I drove to Cannon Beach for the weekend, staying at the same hotel where I'd reimagined my future a year earlier. Walking along the shore at sunset, I felt a profound gratitude for the painful catalyst that had propelled me into this new chapter. My phone buzzed with an email from Olivia Bennett, president of the Portland Business Association, informing me that Mitchell Interiors had been nominated for their annual Emerging Business Award. The ceremony would be held next month at the Riverside restaurant, the very place where David had proposed and where he had failed to meet me for our anniversary dinner. Life's poetry sometimes arrives in unexpected verses. As I watched the sun sink below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues, I thought about time. How we measure it, how we spend it, how we value it. David had collected timepieces worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, yet had squandered the true measure of a life well lived: integrity, commitment, growth. I had sold his collection of hours captured in mechanical precision, and in doing so, had purchased my freedom to fill my own time with purpose and authentic connection. In the end, it wasn't about revenge or even justice. It was about recognizing that sometimes the path to our best future requires dismantling the structures of our past. The watches had kept perfect time, but I had found something more valuable. The courage to start again, the wisdom to build something meaningful, and the strength to wind my own mainspring each day. That was the true timepiece worth cherishing. As I settled into my new apartment near the Pearl District, the reality of my situation began to crystallize. The initial shock and righteous anger had evolved into something more focused, a determination to build something lasting from the ruins of my marriage. My temporary furnished apartment was a far cry from the Lake Oswego craftsman home I'd spent decades perfecting, but there was something freeing about its minimalism. No more curated displays of David's watches, no more carefully arranged furniture, chosen to impress his clients. Just clean lines, functional spaces, and room to breathe. The apartment overlooked a small urban park, and each morning I watched young professionals walking their dogs, artists sketching on benches, and elderly couples holding hands as they followed the winding paths. Life continuing in all its phases, regardless of my personal earthquake. There was comfort in that ongoing rhythm of existence. My phone continued to buzz with messages from David, cycling through what I now recognized as the stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression. I responded only to texts pertaining to practical matters like mail forwarding or the divorce proceedings. Everything else I let drift into the digital void. "Sarah, you can't just sell my life's collection without consequences," one message read. Those watches were my retirement plan. The irony wasn't lost on me. His retirement plan had been my retirement plan too, until he'd systematically drained our joint savings to fund his new life with Amber. I didn't bother responding. The legal process would address it all in due time. Instead, I focused on Mitchell Interiors. The small commercial space I'd leased needed significant work, but that became a blessing in disguise. Transforming it allowed me to showcase exactly the skills I hoped to market, taking an overlooked space and revealing its potential. I spent days sampling paint colors, sourcing sustainable materials, designing custom storage solutions, and creating vignettes that would help clients visualize their possibilities. Raymond Chen, the owner of the building and a successful businessman, in his own right, often stopped by to check on my progress. In his 60s, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled, Raymond had initially been skeptical about renting to a brand new business. Most new ventures fail. Within the first year, he'd warned when I first inquired about the space. And you're starting this during a major life transition. That adds complexity. "I've spent 25 years making other people's visions come to life," I'd replied. "It's time I built my own." Something in my determination must have convinced him. Not only did he rent me the space, but he began offering occasional business advice as I worked on the renovation. "The design looks beautiful," he commented one evening as I was arranging the front display window. "But what's your marketing strategy? How will you differentiate yourself in a city full of designers?" I showed him my business plan, explaining my focus on home staging with an emphasis on properties that had been on the market too long. Most stagers come in with a standard formula: neutral colors, minimal personality, basic furniture arrangements. I want to tell stories with spaces, create emotional connections that help buyers envision their lives there. Raymond nodded thoughtfully. Targeting problematic listings is smart. Real estate agents get desperate when properties sit unsold. They'll be willing to try something different. He paused, looking around at the partially completed showroom. "But you'll need a showcase project, something that demonstrates your approach dramatically." He was right, of course. I needed a success story, and quickly. The funds from the watch sale gave me runway, but they wouldn't last forever. I needed paying clients and word-of-mouth momentum. That night, I expanded my online research on stagnant Portland real estate listings, searching for properties that had been languishing on the market for at least 90 days. One in particular caught my attention, a mid-century modern home in the West Hills that had been listed for nearly 7 months with 2 price reductions. The listing photos showed beautiful architecture hidden beneath dated furniture, cluttered spaces, and poor lighting. The potential was obvious, at least to my trained eye. The next morning, I drove to the real estate office that held the listing. The agent, Jessica Winters, looked exhausted when I mentioned the property. "The Hargrove house," she sighed. "Gorgeous bones, but impossible to sell. The owners inherited it from their parents and have refused every suggestion to update or stage it properly. They insist on keeping all the original furniture and won't invest another dollar in presenting it properly." "What if there was no cost to them?" I asked. "What if I staged it for free, with the understanding that if it sells within 30 days at asking price, I get a percentage of your commission?" Jessica narrowed her eyes. "You're that confident?" I handed her my newly printed business card. "I'm that confident." 2 days later, I met the Hargrove siblings at their parents' home. Alan and Karen Hargrove were in their 50s, clearly uncomfortable with selling their childhood home, but needing to liquidate the asset to settle the estate. "We grew up here," Karen explained as we toured the property. "Every piece of furniture has memories attached." "I understand," I said gently. "My proposition isn't about erasing your parents' presence, but about helping potential buyers see themselves creating their own memories here. We'll treat every item with respect, photograph and document the current arrangement, and return everything exactly as it was if our approach doesn't work." Alan remained skeptical. "And this costs us nothing? What's the catch?" "No catch. I'm building my portfolio and reputation. If the house sells within 30 days at asking price, I get a percentage of the real estate commission. If it doesn't, you're no worse off, and I've gained experience." They exchanged glances, communicating in that silent language of siblings, before finally agreeing. The transformation consumed the next 2 weeks of my life. I carefully cataloged and stored most of the existing furniture, preserving the most distinctive mid-century pieces that aligned with current design trends. I repainted the wood-paneled den a soft gray that brightened the space while respecting its retro character. The avocado kitchen received new hardware and lighting that highlighted its vintage charm rather than attempting to disguise it. Throughout the process, I documented everything on the Mitchell Interiors website and social media accounts Megan had helped me set up. Before and during photos demonstrated the thoughtful transformation in progress. I wanted potential clients to see not just the final result, but the careful consideration behind each decision. The most significant challenge was the sunken living room. Its conversation pit had been revolutionary in the 1960s, but felt awkward to modern buyers. Rather than fighting against this architectural feature, I embraced it, creating a cozy gathering space with modular seating, textural elements, and strategic lighting that transformed it from dated to desirable. When the staging was complete, I invited the Hargrove siblings for the reveal. Karen gasped as she entered the front door. "It still feels like Mom and Dad's house," she said, eyes glistening, "but somehow fresher, like they just redecorated." Alan walked through slowly, touching surfaces and examining details. "You've kept the soul of the place," he acknowledged. "I didn't think that was possible." Jessica arranged for new professional photography, and the refreshed listing went live on a Thursday evening. By Sunday afternoon, the property had received 12 showing requests. On Monday morning, Jessica called me, excitement evident in her voice. "We have 3 offers, all at or above asking price." The Hargrove house sold for $12,000 above the asking price, with minimal contingencies and a quick closing timeline. As promised, Jessica shared a percentage of her commission, resulting in my first significant payment as Mitchell Interiors. More valuable than the money, however, was the feature she arranged in the real estate section of the Oregonian, highlighting the dramatic transformation and rapid sale. My phone began ringing the day the article appeared. 2 more agents with problematic listings, a couple planning to sell their downtown condo, a developer with a new construction project needing model home staging. As I juggled these inquiries and prepared proposals, David's attorney escalated his demands regarding the watch collection. Patricia Williams, my divorce lawyer, remained unruffled. "He's trying to intimidate you," she explained during our weekly update. "The legal reality is that the watches were marital property, just like the retirement accounts he depleted. We have solid documentation of his financial misconduct, which significantly strengthens our position." "But is what I did legal?" I asked, the question that had occasionally woken me in the night. Patricia's expression was measured. "Legal is a spectrum in divorce cases. Was it technically the most procedurally correct approach? No. Did it constitute a reasonable self-help remedy given his actions and the timing? Many judges would think so, especially with the evidence of his planned abandonment." She reshuffled some papers on her desk. "Our settlement proposal is equitable. You're not trying to take everything, just secure your fair share of what remains." After his actions, that reasonableness works in our favor. As my business grew, so did my confidence. I hired my first employee, Jessica's younger sister Zoe, a recent interior design graduate with technology skills I lacked. She modernized our website, implemented a customer relationship management system, and brought fresh design perspectives that complemented my more traditional approach. One evening, as we were closing the showroom, Raymond stopped by with a bottle of champagne. "Congratulations on the Hargrove house," he said, producing 2 glasses from a bag. "First significant victory deserves celebration." We sat on the new display sofa, sipping champagne and discussing business strategy. Raymond's experience proved invaluable as he shared insights from his own entrepreneurial journey. The importance of managing cash flow, the value of strategic partnerships, the necessity of protecting oneself from potential legal challenges. "Speaking of challenges," he said carefully, "how are things progressing with your divorce?" I sighed, setting down my glass. "Slowly. David continues fighting the watch issue, though his position weakens as more evidence of his financial misconduct emerges. The mediation is scheduled for next month." I hesitated, then added, "His girlfriend left him, apparently. Once the money dried up, so did her interest." Raymond nodded thoughtfully. "Men like your husband often learn too late what has real value." He looked around the showroom. "You've built something impressive here, Sarah. Something substantive." His words warmed me more than the champagne. For decades, my worth had been measured by my contribution to David's success, my ability to maintain our home and social calendar, my skill at being the perfect corporate wife. Now I was creating something entirely mine, something that existed, independent of my role in someone else's story. The divorce mediation was scheduled for a Thursday in early June. David arrived with his attorney, Daniel Crawford, a sharply dressed man with an aggressive reputation. I came with Patricia and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing your own value. David looked diminished somehow. His normally immaculate appearance showed subtle signs of neglect, his shirt slightly rumpled, his hair less precisely cut. Our eyes met briefly before he looked away, unable or unwilling to hold my gaze. The mediator, a retired judge named Eleanor Grant, began by establishing ground rules and reviewing the preliminary filings. When she reached the issue of the watch collection, Daniel Crawford leapt in. "My client demands full restitution for the illegal sale of his personal property, valued at approximately $600,000, he stated firmly. "Mrs. Mitchell acted without authorization and must be held accountable." Patricia calmly opened a folder. "We have documented evidence that Mr. Mitchell withdrew approximately $195,000 from joint retirement accounts without Mrs. Mitchell's knowledge or consent over a 4-month period. These funds were used to purchase property and items for his paramour, with whom he was planning to establish residence after abandoning the marriage. She slid copies of bank statements and emails across the table. Furthermore, text messages indicate Mr. Mitchell's intent to file for divorce only after securing these assets in a manner designed to disadvantage Mrs. Mitchell. Judge Grant reviewed the documents carefully while David shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Mrs. Mitchell's actions, while unconventional, represented a reasonable effort to protect her financial interests in the face of Mr. Mitchell's systematic dissipation of marital assets. Patricia continued. The proceeds from the watch sale remain fully documented and accounted for. The mediator looked up from the papers. Mr. Mitchell, did you make these withdrawals from joint accounts? David cleared his throat. Yes, but... And were these funds used as described by Mrs. Mitchell's counsel? He hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Judge Grant turned to Daniel Crawford. Counselor, given your client's admitted actions regarding the retirement accounts, I suggest you reconsider your position on the watch collection. Courts generally take a dim view of parties who deplete marital assets in anticipation of divorce, particularly when done secretly. The remainder of the mediation proceeded more smoothly. By late afternoon, we had reached a settlement agreement that Patricia described as remarkably favorable given the circumstances. I would retain the proceeds from the watch sale minus a small equalization payment. The remaining retirement funds would be divided equally. David would keep the house, but assume full responsibility for its mortgage. My business and its assets would remain entirely mine. As we prepared to sign the final paperwork, David suddenly spoke directly to me for the first time that day. Was it worth it, Sarah? Destroying what we built over 25 years? The room fell silent. Patricia placed a warning hand on my arm, but I gently moved it aside. I didn't destroy what we built, David. You did, one secret withdrawal at a time. I met his eyes steadily. And yes, discovering my own capabilities has been worth every difficult moment. After signing the documents, I walked out of the mediation center into bright June sunshine. A weight I'd carried for months, perhaps years, had lifted. The divorce would be finalized by a judge in the coming weeks, but the substantive issues were resolved. I was free to move forward without looking back. That evening, Megan took me to dinner to celebrate. We sat on the patio of a Riverside restaurant, watching boats glide past as the sun set in spectacular oranges and pinks. To new beginnings, she toasted, raising her glass. And to old friends who make them possible, I added, clinking my glass against hers. I couldn't have done this without you, Meg. She waved away my gratitude. All I did was stand witness while you found your strength. Speaking of which, she pulled an envelope from her purse. A little divorce present. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a phoenix. I felt tears spring to my eyes as I fastened it around my wrist. Rising from the ashes, Megan explained unnecessarily, though in your case, rising from the watches seems more accurate. We laughed, and it felt wonderfully freeing to find humor in what had been so painful just months earlier. With the divorce settlement secured, I turned my full attention to growing Mitchell Interiors. The Hargrove House success had generated significant interest, leading to 3 more staging projects with similar results. Rapid sales at or above asking price after months of market stagnation. Our approach began gaining attention beyond Portland. A Seattle real estate publication featured our work, highlighting our narrative staging philosophy. Ethan Parker, the developer who'd become one of our most enthusiastic supporters, commissioned us to stage all 12 units in his newest conversion project. The business was growing faster than I could manage alone, even with Zoe's help. I hired 2 more employees, a logistics coordinator to manage furniture movement and storage, and a junior designer to assist with project implementation. We moved from our small initial space to a larger showroom still within Raymond's building, negotiating favorable terms based on our proven success. 6 months after selling David's watch collection, Mitchell Interiors had become Portland's most talked-about staging and design firm. We had expanded beyond staging into full-service interior design, attracting clients who had seen our staged properties and wanted similar transformations for their permanent residences. I rarely thought about David until Megan mentioned running into him at a grocery store. "He asked about you," she reported over coffee one Sunday. "Wanted to know how your business was doing." "What did you tell him?" I asked, surprised by his interest. "The truth. That you're thriving." She stirred her latte thoughtfully. He seemed genuinely glad to hear it, which was unexpected. Said something about how he always knew you were talented but never gave you space to develop it. I considered this as I sipped my own coffee. Had David actually recognized my potential all those years? Or was this revisionist history a way for him to reframe his suppression of my ambitions as something more benign? It didn't matter now. Whatever David had seen or failed to see in me was no longer relevant to my path forward. The person I had become business owner, designer, financially independent woman existed because I had finally seen those qualities in myself. The first anniversary of my discovery of David's betrayal approached with surprising gentleness. The date registered in my mind, but the sharp pain that had once accompanied every memory had dulled to a reflective awareness. I decided to mark the occasion not with bitterness, but with forward movement. I made an offer on a small bungalow in the Selwood neighborhood, using some of the proceeds from the watch sale as a substantial down payment. The house needed significant updating, but its bones were good. Hardwood floors beneath worn carpet, original woodwork hidden under layers of paint, a promising garden space neglected by previous owners. Just as I had done with client homes, I saw not what the bungalow was, but what it could become. This would be my personal project, the physical manifestation of my new beginning. I would transform it slowly, deliberately, making each choice with care and intention rather than urgency. The day after my offer was accepted, Ethan Parker invited me to lunch at an upscale restaurant downtown. I assumed he wanted to discuss his next development project, but instead, he presented an unexpected proposition. "I'm launching a design build firm focused on sustainable urban housing," he explained after we ordered. "Affordable but beautiful spaces that make city living accessible to more people. I need a design partner who understands how to maximize both function and emotional appeal in smaller footprints." He slid a folder across the table. Inside was a partnership proposal offering a significant ownership stake in the new venture. "Why me?" I asked, genuinely curious. "There are designers with decades more experience." Ethan leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Because you see potential where others see limitations. The way you transformed that mid-century modern house without erasing its character, that's exactly the approach we need for these projects. Plus," he added with a smile, "you've proven you can build something successful from scratch under difficult circumstances. That's rare." I promised to consider his offer carefully, taking the folder home to review the details. The opportunity was tempting. A chance to scale my impact beyond individual homes, to help shape how people lived in urban environments. But it would also mean shifting focus from the business I'd just established, potentially diluting the brand I'd worked so hard to build. That evening, I called Raymond for advice. He listened carefully to the proposal, asking insightful questions about structure, control, and growth potential. "It's a compelling opportunity," he acknowledged when I finished explaining. "But remember that true success comes from passion, not just good business terms. Does this new direction excite you as much as what you've built with Mitchell Interiors?" His question made me realize I needed time for reflection, something I hadn't given myself much of during the whirlwind of the past year. I had moved frantically from crisis to construction, from betrayal to business launch, without fully processing the emotional journey. The following weekend, I drove to Cannon Beach, checking into a small inn with ocean views. For 2 days, I walked the shoreline, collected shells, and thought deeply about what I truly wanted for my future. Without David's presence, without the pressure of being the perfect corporate wife, who was I becoming? What work would fulfill me, challenge me, and allow me to make the contribution I wanted to make? I returned to Portland with clarity. I would decline Ethan's partnership offer but propose a collaborative arrangement instead. Mitchell Interiors would handle design aspects of his new developments while maintaining our independence and continuing our other client work. When we met to discuss my decision, Ethan seemed disappointed but understanding. "Your counter-proposal makes sense from your perspective," he conceded. "And perhaps it's better to start with collaboration before considering deeper integration. Let's try it on the first project and see how it works." As summer turned to fall, my business continued to flourish. We expanded to a team of 8, taking on projects throughout the Portland metro area and occasionally beyond. The bungalow renovation progressed steadily, becoming both my sanctuary and my personal design laboratory. One crisp October morning, I arrived at the showroom to find a familiar figure waiting outside, David. My stomach tightened reflexively, but I approached with professional composure. "David, this is unexpected." He looked better than the last time I'd seen him, more put together, less haunted around the eyes. "I was hoping we could talk briefly, about a professional matter." Curious despite myself, I unlocked the showroom and led him inside. He looked around appreciatively at the displays we'd created, the before and after project photos, the carefully curated vignettes. "This is impressive, Sarah. Truly." His voice held genuine admiration. "You've built something remarkable here." "Thank you," I replied, maintaining a careful distance both physically and emotionally. "What can I help you with?" David explained that he had decided to sell our former home. The mortgage was too burdensome for one income, and the house held too many memories. "Several agents have recommended your company for staging," he said, unable to mask the irony in his voice. "They say you're the best in Portland at maximizing value." The symmetry was almost too perfect. The home I had spent decades perfecting, the space that had been the backdrop for our entire marriage, now required my professional touch to appeal to new owners. "We're booking about 6 weeks out right now," I said, neither accepting nor declining the potential commission. "Zoe can check the exact schedule if you're interested." David nodded slowly. "I'd appreciate that." He hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, Sarah, I'm sorry. Not just for the decisions that ended our marriage, but for all the years I didn't see what you were capable of, what you needed." I studied him, trying to gauge the sincerity behind his words. Was this genuine remorse or simply the regret of a man facing the consequences of his actions? "Thank you for saying that," I replied finally. "But I'm not sorry anymore. Everything that happened led me here, to this business, to rediscovering what I love doing. Sometimes painful endings create necessary beginnings." After David left, I sat alone in the showroom, considering the strange circularity of life. A year ago, I had been devastated by his betrayal, selling his prized collection in a desperate bid to secure my future. Now I was a successful business owner being asked to help him transition away from our shared past. The young woman who had abandoned her design studies to support her husband's career couldn't have imagined this future. She couldn't have conceived of the strength she would find in starting over, the satisfaction in creating something entirely her own, or the peace that comes from knowing your own value independent of someone else's assessment. That evening, as I worked on design plans for my bungalow's kitchen renovation, I received an email notification that Mitchell Interiors had been nominated for the Portland Business Journal's Emerging Enterprise of the Year award. The recognition felt like the closing of one circle and the opening of another, an acknowledgement not just of business success, but of personal transformation. I thought about David's watches, those mechanical marvels that had counted the hours of our marriage with such precision. Their sale had ultimately purchased something far more valuable than time. It had bought me the opportunity to discover who I could become when standing firmly on my own ground. The hands of those timepieces had moved ever forward, never backwards. And so would I. The Portland Business Journal's Emerging Enterprise of the Year nomination changed everything for Mitchell Interiors. Suddenly, I wasn't just the woman who had reinvented herself after divorce. I was a serious business contender in Portland's competitive design market. The morning after receiving the nomination email, I arrived at the showroom to find a bouquet of flowers from the Portland Real Estate Association with a note that read, "Congratulations on your well-deserved recognition. You've transformed more than houses. You've transformed our sales results." Our phone lines lit up with new inquiries, and my email inbox filled with congratulatory messages and partnership proposals. Local television station KGW requested an interview for their Portland Entrepreneurs segment. The Oregonian wanted to feature us in their Sunday business profile. Even the Seattle Times expressed interest in our narrative staging approach as something potentially revolutionary in real estate marketing. It was overwhelming and exhilarating all at once. For the first time, I hired a public relations consultant, a sharp, energetic woman named Tara Wilson who specialized in design industry promotion. "You've been operating under the radar for too long," she declared during our first meeting. "Your story combined with your design talent is marketing gold." The PR push paid off almost immediately. Tara arranged a feature in Pacific Northwest, Home magazine that showcased 3 of our most successful transformations, including the Hargrove house that had launched our reputation. The 12-page spread included lavish before and after photography and a sidebar about my personal journey that tastefully touched on my midlife career change without delving into the painful details of my divorce. "There's something especially powerful about a woman who reinvents herself in her 50s, the writer observed in the article. Sarah Mitchell brings that personal Renaissance energy to every space she touches, seeing potential where others see only problems. During this whirlwind of attention, I received an unexpected call from Patricia Williams, my divorce attorney. "Sarah, I have some information you should know," she began without preamble. "David has listed your former home with Harper Realty. The listing agent is Amber Collins." The name hit me like a physical blow. Amber, the woman who had been the catalyst for my discovery of David's betrayal, the intended recipient of our retirement funds, the girlfriend who had left him when the money dried up. "That's unexpected," I managed after a moment of shocked silence. "Indeed," Patricia replied, her tone carefully neutral. "Apparently, Ms. Collins obtained her real estate license 6 months ago. This appears to be one of her first significant listings." After thanking Patricia for the information, I sat in my office, turning over this strange development. Why would David choose Amber as his listing agent? Was it reconciliation? Desperation? Some complicated form of atonement? Whatever his reasons, it created an awkward situation given his inquiry about Mitchell Interiors staging the property. I called Zoe into my office to discuss the situation. As my now senior designer and operations manager, she had earned my complete trust over the past year of working together. "David Mitchell's house is being listed by his former girlfriend," I explained, keeping my tone professionally detached. "The one he was planning to leave me for." Zoe's eyes widened. "Well, that's uncomfortable, and he still wants us to stage." He requested our services before this development. I'm not sure if the offer still stands, or if Amber Collins has other staging connections she prefers. "What do you want to do if they do contact us?" Zoe asked, always practical. I considered the question carefully. My initial emotional reaction was to refuse any association with either David or Amber. The house itself held too many memories, too many years of supporting David's career while sublimating my own ambitions. But professional growth sometimes requires setting personal feelings aside. If they formally request our services, we'll treat it like any other project, I decided. We'll provide our standard proposal, timeline, and fee structure. No special treatment, but no penalty either. Zoe nodded approvingly. Taking the high road. I like it. The anticipated call came the following day, not from David or Amber, but from Harper Realty's managing broker, Eleanor Harper herself. A powerhouse in Portland real estate for over 30 years, Eleanor was known for her direct approach and impeccable professional standards. "Sarah, I'll get straight to the point," she began. "We have a potentially sensitive situation with the Mitchell listing on Greenwood Drive. The homeowner has specifically requested Mitchell interiors for staging, but the listing agent is..." She paused delicately. "Someone with whom you have a complicated history." "Amber Collins?" I supplied, appreciating Eleanor's tactful approach. "Yes. I wanted to speak with you personally before proceeding. If this arrangement would be uncomfortable for you or potentially compromise the professional standards of either firm, we can make alternative arrangements." Eleanor's consideration impressed me. "I appreciate your concern, Eleanor, but Mitchell Interiors is prepared to handle the project professionally if that's what the homeowner wants. Our personal histories won't affect our work quality." "Excellent," Eleanor sounded relieved. "That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. Ms. Collins is new to our firm and eager to establish herself. This listing is significant for her career development, but the homeowner was quite insistent about wanting your company's services specifically." We arranged a preliminary site visit for the following week, with Eleanor suggesting she would attend along with Amber to facilitate smooth communication. I agreed to bring Zoe rather than handling the project personally, a small concession to emotional self-protection that still maintained our professional commitment. Before the scheduled visit, I received an unexpected call from Raymond Chen, my landlord and unofficial business mentor. "Sarah, do you have time for lunch today? There's an opportunity I'd like to discuss with you." We met at a quiet Japanese restaurant near our building. After ordering, Raymond explained his purpose. "I've been approached by Green Living Developments about a major project in the South Waterfront District. They're creating a mixed-use building with retail, offices, and residential units, all built to the highest sustainability standards." He paused, taking a sip of his tea. "They need an interior design partner who understands both aesthetics and environmental responsibility. I recommended you." "Me?" I was genuinely surprised. "There are larger firms with more experience in commercial projects." Raymond shook his head. "They don't want an institutional approach. They're looking for someone who can bring warmth and livability to sustainable design, exactly what you've demonstrated with your residential work." He slid a folder across the table containing project specifications, timeline, and compensation details. The scope was significantly larger than anything Mitchell Interiors had undertaken, a 12-month commitment with a budget that would effectively double our annual revenue. "This is substantial," I said, reviewing the numbers. "It's also perfectly timed," Raymond observed. "With your recent publicity and award nomination, you have the momentum to make this leap successfully." After lunch, I returned to the showroom to find Tara waiting with more good news. A national sustainable building magazine wanted to feature Mitchell Interiors in an article about eco-friendly staging practices. "They're particularly interested in your approach to repurposing existing furniture rather than bringing in all new pieces," Tara explained. "It's a perfect opportunity to position the company as environmentally conscious as well as design forward." The convergence of opportunities was dizzying. In just over a year, I had gone from selling my husband's watches in a desperate bid for Financial security to being courted for major commercial projects and national magazine features. The pace of change was both exhilarating and somewhat frightening. That evening, I drove to my Selwood bungalow, still in the midst of renovations, but increasingly taking shape as my true home. The kitchen had been completed the previous month, a bright, functional space with sustainable bamboo cabinetry, locally sourced stone countertops, and energy-efficient appliances. I poured a glass of wine and carried it to the back porch, where I was gradually transforming the neglected yard into a serene garden retreat. As twilight settled over Portland, I contemplated the crossroads before me. The Green Living project represented a significant evolution for Mitchell Interiors. Larger scale, more public impact, higher financial stakes. Was I ready to expand so quickly? Should I maintain focus on the residential work that had built our reputation? And then there was the uncomfortable prospect of the upcoming site visit to my former home, now being sold by the woman for whom David had been willing to dismantle our retirement. The symmetry was almost too perfect. Amber trying to sell the house while I was asked to make it appealing to buyers. How would she react to working with me? How would I manage my own complex emotions about the property I had once considered my life's aesthetic achievement? The site visit day arrived with unusual November sunshine breaking through Portland's typical gray clouds. I met Zoe at the showroom to review our approach before heading to Greenwood Drive. Remember, this is just another project, I told her, though the reminder was more for myself than for her. We evaluate the space, identify opportunities for improvement, and create a staging plan that maximizes appeal. The property's history and the people involved are irrelevant to our process. Zoe nodded, her expression sympathetic but professional. I've prepared our standard assessment forms and brought the portfolio of available inventory. We'll handle this exactly like any other consultation. Eleanor Harper's sleek black Mercedes was already parked in the driveway when we arrived. She greeted us warmly, every inch the consummate professional in her tailored suit and perfect silver bob. Beside her stood Amber Collins, looking markedly different from the youthful, carefree woman in the photos I'd discovered on David's laptop. In person, Amber appeared younger than I'd imagined, perhaps early 30s rather than mid-30s, and considerably more nervous. Her handshake was slightly damp, her smile tight at the corners. Ms. Mitchell, thank you for agreeing to consult on this property. Your firm's reputation is exceptional. Thank you, Ms. Collins, I replied evenly. This is Zoe Winters, our senior designer who will be overseeing this project if we move forward. Eleanor smoothly guided us into the house, maintaining a stream of professional conversation that bridged the awkward undercurrents. As you can see, the property has excellent bones, but needs freshening to appeal to today's buyers. The owner has authorized a staging budget of $15,000, which I understand is within your typical range for a property of this size. I stepped through the front door of what had been my home for over 2 decades, bracing for an emotional response that surprisingly didn't come. The space felt different somehow. Emptier, certainly, with many of my personal touches removed, but also energetically changed. This wasn't my home anymore. It was simply a property with potential and challenges. David had kept much of the furniture, but removed most of the art and decorative elements I had chosen over the years. The result was a space that felt unbalanced and impersonal. Good bones, as Eleanor had said, but lacking cohesion and emotional appeal. Zoe and I moved methodically through each room, noting dimensions, lighting conditions, architectural features, and staging opportunities. I maintained professional detachment, discussing the space as I would any client property. The living room needs anchoring elements to define conversation areas. The dining room would benefit from a statement light fixture to draw the eye upward to the coffered ceiling. The primary bedroom suite should be reimagined as a retreat space rather than just a sleeping area. As we completed our assessment, Eleanor drew me aside while Zoe discussed some technical details with Amber. "You're handling this beautifully, Sarah," she said quietly. "I know it can't be easy." "It's actually less difficult than I anticipated," I admitted. "The house feels like someone else's now." Eleanor nodded approvingly. "That's growth. Not everyone manages to achieve that kind of emotional distance." We concluded the visit with a brief discussion of next steps. Mitchell Interiors would prepare a detailed proposal with specific recommendations, timeline, and final cost estimates within 3 business days. As we prepared to leave, Amber approached me directly. "Ms. Mitchell," she began, her voice slightly unsteady, "I want to say, that is, I feel I should acknowledge—" She stopped, seemingly struggling to find appropriate words. "Ms. Collins," I interrupted gently, "we're here in a professional capacity. Personal history doesn't need to be part of our working relationship." Relief washed visibly across her features. "Thank you. I appreciate your discretion." On the drive back to the showroom, Zoe finally let her professional facade crack. "That was the most tension-filled home assessment I've ever experienced," she declared. "You were amazing. I couldn't tell you had any connection to that house at all." I smiled at her enthusiasm. "It helps that David has changed so much already. The house I created doesn't really exist anymore." I paused, considering the strange turns life can take. And honestly, it's hard to feel territorial about a space when you've built something more meaningful elsewhere. Back at the office, I turned my attention to the Green Living project, thoroughly reviewing the materials Raymond had provided. The development's vision aligned beautifully with the values I had been integrating into Mitchell Interiors. Sustainability. Without sacrifice of beauty, functionality enhanced rather than limited by environmental consciousness, spaces that tell authentic stories about their inhabitants. After careful consideration, I decided to pursue both opportunities, the commercial project with Green Living and the residential staging of my former home. Each represented an important aspect of Mitchell Interiors' evolution, expanding our scope while continuing to excel in our core expertise. To manage the increased workload, I would need to grow the team further. I created job descriptions for 2 new positions, a project manager specifically for the Green Living development, and another junior designer to support our residential work. The business that had begun as my solo reinvention was becoming a true design firm with specialized roles and multiple simultaneous projects. The following week brought another significant milestone, the Portland Business Journal's award ceremony. The Emerging Enterprise of the Year would be announced at a gala dinner attended by the city's business leaders, local politicians, and press. Tara insisted I invest in a statement outfit for the occasion, accompanying me to a high-end boutique where we selected a sleek emerald jumpsuit that combined professional authority with contemporary style. "You need to look the part of a design visionary," she explained as I balked slightly at the price tag. "This is as much about brand representation as personal appearance." The evening of the gala, Megan came to my bungalow to help me prepare. As I finished applying my makeup, she held up her phone to show me a local business newsletter. "Have you seen this? David's financial advisory firm is merging with a larger company. The announcement went out today." I took the phone, scanning the brief article. Pearson Dynamics was acquiring Mitchell Financial Advisors, with David taking a senior but not leadership role in the combined organization. The merger would be completed by year-end. "Interesting timing," I remarked, handing back the phone. "Publishing this the same day as the business awards ceremony." Megan raised an eyebrow. "Do you think he knew you were nominated?" "Possibly. Portland's business community is fairly interconnected." I considered the implications as I fastened a simple gold necklace around my neck. But it doesn't matter anymore. His career trajectory isn't relevant to mine. Megan studied me for a moment, then smiled approvingly. "You really mean that, don't you? A year ago, you would have been analyzing what this meant about him, about your marriage, about what could have been different." "Growth," as Eleanor Harper would say, I replied lightly, though Megan's observation was accurate. I had moved beyond measuring my life in relation to David's. His successes, his failures, his choices no longer shaped my emotional landscape or professional decisions. We arrived at the downtown hotel venue to find it transformed into an elegant event space with tables arranged around a central stage. The Mitchell Interiors table included my core team, Zoe, our logistics coordinator Marcus, junior designer Ellie, and our newly hired project manager for the Green Living development, Vincent. I had also invited Raymond and Tara as key supporters of our growth. As we enjoyed dinner, I scanned the room curiously. Many faces were familiar from my years as David's wife, attending similar business functions in a completely different role. Several people stopped by our table to offer congratulations on the nomination and express admiration for Mitchell Interiors' rapid rise. Each conversation reinforced how thoroughly my professional identity had transformed. I was no longer David, Mitchell's wife, but Sarah Mitchell, design entrepreneur. When the awards presentation began, I felt unexpectedly nervous. While winning would certainly boost Mitchell Interiors' profile, the nomination itself had already generated significant positive attention. The recognition from peers and potential clients represented validation of my vision and execution, regardless of the final outcome. The nominees for Emerging Enterprise of the Year demonstrate exceptional innovation, growth potential, and positive community impact, the presenter announced. Each has shown remarkable achievement in their first years of operation. As they highlighted each nominated business with a brief video, I watched with a designer's critical eye, noting the professional quality of our presentation compared to some others. Tara had insisted on hiring a top-tier production company for our nomination package, arguing that a design firm must showcase itself visually to be credible. And the winner of this year's Emerging Enterprise Award is... The presenter paused dramatically, opening an envelope. Mitchell Interiors, for revolutionary approaches to property staging and sustainable design. The table erupted in cheers as spotlight found us. Zoe squeezed my arm excitedly as I rose, to make my way to the stage, accepting handshakes and congratulations from other attendees as I passed their tables. Standing at the podium, award in hand, I looked out at the room full of Portland's business establishment, people who had once known me only as an accessory to David's career. The moment felt surreal, yet perfectly right, as if my life had been moving toward this recognition all along, through paths I couldn't have anticipated. Thank you for this tremendous honor, I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. When I founded Mitchell Interiors, I had a simple mission: to reveal the potential in overlooked spaces, to show that with vision, creativity, and strategic intervention, any environment can be transformed into something beautiful and functional. I paused, looking toward my team's table. Great design isn't about imposing your aesthetic on a space. It's about listening to what the space wants to become, finding its authentic story, and helping to tell that story more clearly. In many ways, it's like life itself. Sometimes we need to strip away what's not working to reveal the beauty that was always there, waiting to emerge. The audience's warm response encouraged me to continue with the personal note I had debated, including, my own journey to founding this company wasn't direct or easy. Like many women of my generation, I deferred professional dreams to support others. When circumstances forced me to reconsider that choice, I discovered capabilities within myself I had long forgotten or never fully recognized. I looked around the room, making eye contact with several women my age or older. If there's one message I hope Mitchell Interiors communicates beyond our design philosophy, it's this: it's never too late to recognize your own value and build something meaningful from it. Thank you for this recognition, which I share with my amazing team and everyone who took a chance on a new beginning. The applause that followed felt like affirmation not just of Mitchell Interior's success, but of the personal transformation that had made it possible. As I returned to our table, Raymond leaned over to whisper, "Perfect speech. Authentic, inspirational, and on brand." The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations, business card exchanges, and impromptu interviews with local media. By the time we left the venue, Mitchell Interiors had secured 3 new potential clients and an invitation to participate in an upcoming sustainable design showcase. As Megan drove me home, I scrolled through the congratulatory texts, flooding my phone. Among them was a simple message from a number I still recognized, despite having deleted the contact months ago. "Congratulations, Sarah. Well-deserved recognition. David." I showed Megan the text, curious about her reaction. "Are you going to respond?" she asked, glancing away from the road momentarily. I considered the question, weighing the options. A year ago, David's acknowledgement would have meant everything. Validation I had desperately sought throughout our marriage. Now it was merely a courteous professional gesture, no more significant than the dozens of other congratulatory messages I'd received. "Yes," I decided, typing a simple reply. "Thank you, David. I heard about your firm's merger. Wishing you success with the transition. Proper, professional, emotionally neutral." The message acknowledged his courtesy while maintaining appropriate boundaries, exactly the relationship we now had. The following morning, still basking in the afterglow of the award recognition, I arrived at the showroom to find an enormous arrangement of orchids with a card from Eleanor Harper. "Congratulations on your well-deserved award. Your team's proposal for the Greenwood Drive property is exceptional. Contract enclosed for your signature." The staging contract for my former home had been approved in full, without negotiation on price or timeline. It was another professional milestone, our highest value residential staging contract to date, based entirely on the merit of our proposal rather than personal connections. As I reviewed the contract details, my phone rang with a Portland area code I didn't recognize. "Sarah Mitchell?" I answered, still scanning the document. "Ms. Mitchell, this is James Peterson from Green Living Developments," a warm baritone voice responded. "I'm calling to follow up on the project materials Raymond Chen shared with you. We arranged a meeting for the following day to discuss Mitchell Interior's potential role in the South Waterfront project." As I hung up, I realized how dramatically my professional world had expanded. From a desperate seller of watches to an award-winning business owner fielding calls from major developers, the transformation seemed almost miraculous when viewed from the outside. Yet I knew the truth was far more mundane and universal. I had simply, finally recognized my own capabilities and committed to developing them. The potential had always existed within me, dormant during my years of prioritizing David's career, but never truly extinguished. That evening, I worked late at the showroom, finalizing our staging plan for the Greenwood Drive property. We would begin installation the following week, transforming the house I had once poured my creativity into as a wife into a showcase that would launch another family's story. As I gathered my things to leave, I noticed Raymond standing in the doorway of the showroom, watching me with a contemplative expression. "Congratulations again on the award," he said as I approached. "Though I'm not surprised. You've shown remarkable determination this past year." "Thank you for all your support," I replied sincerely. "Your guidance has been invaluable." He waved away my gratitude. "I merely provided some business context. You provided the vision and persistence." He hesitated, then added, "I have a personal query if you don't mind. Having observed your journey this past year, from selling those watches to winning that award, what would you say was the most important factor in your transformation?" The question deserved thoughtful consideration. I reflected for a moment before answering. "Recognizing that value is inherent, not assigned," I said finally. For years, I allowed others, primarily David, to determine what I was worth, what I could achieve, what space I could occupy. When circumstances forced me to reassess that perspective, I discovered that my value existed independently of anyone else's assessment. That realization changed everything. Raymond nodded slowly, as if I had confirmed something he already suspected. "That's the most valuable discovery anyone can make," he said quietly. "Most people never achieve it." As I drove home through Portland's evening traffic, I considered Raymond's response and the journey that had led to that fundamental insight. David's betrayal, painful as it had been, had ultimately given me a priceless gift: the opportunity to discover my own worth, outside the context of our marriage. The watches he had valued so highly had indeed been an investment, though not in the way he had intended. They had funded not just a business, but a complete reclamation of self, a return to the woman I might have become had I not set aside my own ambitions for his. The irony wasn't lost on me. David had spent decades accumulating timepieces that measured hours with exquisite precision, yet had failed to recognize the value of the time we shared. I had sold those watches in a desperate bid for financial security and inadvertently purchased something far more precious: the freedom to become fully myself. As I pulled into the driveway of my Selwood bungalow, still in mid-renovation but increasingly feeling like home, I felt profound gratitude for the painful catalyst that had launched my transformation. Without David's betrayal, without the discovery of his secret girlfriend and depleted retirement accounts, I might never have found the courage to reclaim my deferred dreams. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: staging my former home, meeting with green living developments, expanding our team to manage increasing opportunities. But tonight, in the quiet of my own space, surrounded by design choices that reflected my authentic aesthetic rather than strategic social positioning, I savored the simple pleasure of being exactly where I was meant to be, building exactly what I was meant to create. The watches that had once represented David's pride now fueled my purpose. Their value, transformed through my vision and effort, had multiplied in ways their original owner could never have imagined. What better investment could there possibly be? The staging of my former home on Greenwood Drive began on a crisp December morning. I'd decided to oversee the project personally, despite my initial instinct to delegate it to Zoe. This wasn't about confronting painful memories anymore. It was about demonstrating to myself how completely I had moved beyond them. As I pulled into the familiar driveway, the house looked smaller somehow, less imposing than it had when it represented the culmination of my life's work as David's wife. Our staging team arrived promptly at 8, 2 moving trucks filled with carefully selected furniture, artwork, and accessories. I had chosen a design concept that respected the home's traditional architecture while introducing contemporary elements that would appeal to younger, affluent buyers. The approach was deliberately different from how I had styled the house during my marriage, less about showcasing status and more about creating an emotionally resonant living experience. "We'll start with the main living areas," I instructed the team as they unloaded. "Marcus, please coordinate furniture placement according to the floor plan. Ellie, you'll handle accessories and styling once the major pieces are in place." As I walked through the empty rooms, I realized David had removed everything that remained of our shared life together. No family photos, no accumulated mementos, no evidence of our 25 years of marriage. The space was a clean slate, professionally cleaned but eerily blank, awaiting its next story. Amber Collins arrived mid-morning, clipboard in hand and professional smile in place. If she felt awkward about my presence, she hid it well behind a veneer of real estate enthusiasm. "The photographer is scheduled for Thursday," she informed me, "and we plan to list next Monday. The timing is perfect for capturing buyers wanting to close before year-end for tax purposes." "We'll be finished tomorrow afternoon," I assured her. "That leaves plenty of time for photography and any adjustments you might want." She nodded, then hesitated before adding, "Your team's work is already transforming the space. It's remarkable how different it feels with the right pieces in place." There was something in her tone, a hint of genuine appreciation mixed with what might have been regret. That made me look at her more closely. Behind the professional makeup and carefully styled hair, Amber Collins appeared tired, perhaps even unhappy. I wondered briefly about her current relationship with David, then reminded myself it was no longer my concern. The first day of staging progressed efficiently, our team transforming empty rooms into inviting vignettes of aspirational living. The living room received a balanced arrangement of clean-lined furniture in neutral tones, accented with carefully chosen textiles and art that added color without overwhelming the space. The dining room featured a statement chandelier that drew attention to the room's impressive ceiling height and a table set for entertaining that suggested a gracious lifestyle. By late afternoon, we had completed the main floor transformation. Amber, who had been in and out all day showing another property nearby, returned for a final check before leaving. She walked through the spaces slowly, her expression revealing genuine admiration. "This is extraordinary," she said finally. "The house feels completely different, more alive somehow." "That's the goal of effective staging," I explained. "Maintaining professional distance. We want potential buyers to feel an emotional connection to the space, to imagine their own lives unfolding here." She nodded, then said something unexpected. "You know, Sarah, Ms. Mitchell, I never saw this house when you lived here, but David talked about it constantly. How perfectly you had designed everything, how every guest commented on its beauty." She paused, seeming to search for the right words. "I think I always felt I was competing with not just you, but with this." She gestured around the room. "This life you created." Her candor caught me off guard. This wasn't the conversation I had prepared for with Amber Collins. I had anticipated awkward professionalism or possibly subtle hostility, not this strange vulnerability. "The life I created here wasn't as perfect as it appeared," I responded carefully. That's often the case with beautifully designed spaces. They can conceal complicated realities. Amber nodded slowly. "I'm learning that." She checked her watch and moved toward the door. "I should go. Thank you for your work today. It's truly transformative." After she left, I found myself pondering her parting words and wistful expression. Had things not worked out as she expected with David? Was she discovering that the man who had betrayed his wife might not be entirely trustworthy in other relationships either? It wasn't my problem to solve, yet I felt an unexpected twinge of empathy for this younger woman who might be learning similar painful lessons about valuing herself. The second day of staging focused on the bedrooms and home office. We transformed the primary bedroom into a serene retreat with layered bedding, subtle lighting, and artwork that suggested sophistication without ostentation. The guest rooms received distinct personalities. One, a potential home office turned guest room combination ideal for today's remote workers. The other, a calming space perfect for visiting family. David's former home office presented the greatest challenge. The room where I had discovered his betrayal, where I had first seen the evidence of his secret life with Amber, and his systematic depletion of our retirement accounts. I had avoided thinking about this particular space when planning the staging, delegating its design concept to Zoe. Now, standing in the doorway, I felt a momentary wave of remembered pain. The shock and disbelief of that anniversary night when my world had shifted irrevocably. Zoe approached quietly, sensing my hesitation. "We could handle this room if you prefer," she offered. I shook my head. "No, I'm fine. The design concept for this space is particularly strong. I want to see it implemented properly." We transformed the traditional masculine office into a flexible creative space, part library, part music room, part home office. The heavy desk was replaced with a lighter writing table positioned to enjoy the garden view. Bookshelves were styled with a careful balance of books, art objects, and negative space. A comfortable reading chair and small side table created a cozy corner perfect for quiet contemplation. By late afternoon, the entire house had been staged to perfection. I walked through each room making final adjustments, shifting a vase slightly, rearranging a throw pillow, adjusting the angle of an art piece. These subtle refinements might go unnoticed by most observers, but they created a harmonious whole that would be unconsciously perceived by potential buyers. Amber arrived for the final inspection, bringing Eleanor Harper with her. The two realtors moved through the house with professional appreciation, making notes and discussing photography angles for the listing. "Sarah, this exceeds our expectations," Eleanor declared as they completed their tour. "The transformation is remarkable. You've created a completely different feeling while respecting the home's essential character." "That's our specialty," I replied, pleased with the outcome despite the complicated emotions the project had stirred. Revealing the potential that was always present, but perhaps not fully expressed. As the staging team packed up their equipment and prepared to leave, I took one final walk through the house alone. These rooms had witnessed my life for over 2 decades. Dinner parties and quiet evenings, holidays and ordinary days. The slow erosion of a marriage that had once seemed unshakable. Now they had been reimagined for someone else's story, someone else's future. I paused in the foyer, remembering the countless times I had welcomed guests, accepted deliveries, returned from errands, all the mundane moments that accumulate into a life. The space no longer held emotional power over me. It was simply a house, beautifully proportioned, well located, thoughtfully designed, but just a structure made of wood and glass and stone. What had once been the center of my identity, the perfect home created by the perfect corporate wife, was now merely another successful project in Mitchell Interior's growing portfolio. The realization brought not sadness, but a profound sense of freedom. I had truly moved beyond this chapter of my life, not just physically but emotionally. The following day brought my scheduled meeting with James Peterson from Green Living Developments. I arrived at their downtown office prepared with a comprehensive presentation outlining Mitchell Interior's approach to their South Waterfront project. The reception area exuded eco-conscious sophistication, reclaimed wood furnishings, living plant walls, and subtle lighting powered by the building's solar array. James greeted me warmly, his tall frame casually dressed in what I recognized as sustainable luxury brands. In his early 40s, with prematurely gray hair and striking green eyes, he projected calm authority and genuine enthusiasm for sustainable design. "Sarah, thank you for making time to meet. Raymond speaks very highly of your work, and your recent award only confirms his assessment." He led me to a conference room where 3 other team members waited: the project architect, construction, manager, and marketing director. My presentation focused on how Mitchell Interiors would approach the interior spaces of the mixed-use development, creating cohesive design language across retail, office, and residential components while allowing each to maintain distinct identity and functionality. I emphasized our commitment to sourcing sustainable materials without compromising aesthetics or durability. The challenge with eco-conscious design is overcoming the perception that it must either look overtly green or sacrifice beauty for sustainability, I explained, showing slides of previous projects where we had seamlessly integrated environmental responsibility with sophisticated design. Our approach is to make sustainable choices invisible but impactful. Materials, sourcing, production methods that minimize environmental footprint while maximizing visual and tactile appeal. The team responded with thoughtful questions and genuine engagement. By the meeting's conclusion, it was clear that our design philosophy aligned perfectly with Green Living's vision for the development. "We were considering several design firms," James acknowledged as he walked me out. "But your presentation confirmed what Raymond suggested. You bring a unique perspective that bridges sustainable practice with market-ready aesthetics. That's exactly what this project needs. Contract negotiations progressed quickly, and within 2 weeks, Mitchell Interiors had officially signed on as the interior design partner for the South Waterfront development. The project would require expanding our team further, adding specialists in commercial design, sustainability certification, and project management. Vincent, our recently hired commercial project manager, had already begun assembling a dedicated team for the Green Living contract. His background in large-scale commercial projects complemented my residential expertise perfectly, allowing Mitchell Interiors to grow into this new market without sacrificing our core business. As the year drew to a close, I found myself working late one evening, reviewing applications for our newly created positions. The showroom was quiet, most staff having left hours earlier. The silence was broken by an incoming call from Amber. Collins. "Sarah, I apologize for calling after business hours," she began, her voice slightly strained. "But I wanted to let you know personally. We received 3 offers on Greenwood Drive today, all above asking price." "That's excellent news," I replied, genuinely pleased with the result. A testament to good staging combined with proper pricing and marketing. "The selling point for every single buyer was the interior design," Amber continued. "They all mentioned how they could immediately envision themselves living there. One couple even asked if the furniture could be included in the sale." I smiled at this common reaction to effective staging. That's the highest compliment in our business, when buyers want to purchase not just the house but the entire lifestyle we've created. There was a brief pause before Amber added, "David is very pleased with the outcome. He asked me to convey his appreciation for your work." Something in her tone, a slight hesitation perhaps, or a careful formality, suggested there was more to this conversation than professional courtesy. I waited, sensing she had called for reasons beyond sharing good news about the property. "I also wanted to say," she continued after a moment, "what you did with that house, transforming it so completely from what it was when you lived there, it made me realize something about myself, I mean." She took an audible breath. "I've spent over a year trying to fit myself into David's world, trying to be what he needed after things fell apart with you. But seeing how you've completely reinvented yourself, your career, your life, it made me wonder if I'm undervaluing my own possibilities." Her unexpected vulnerability left me momentarily speechless. How strange to be receiving what amounted to life advice consultation from the woman who had been my husband's affair partner. "Recognizing your own value is always the first step toward positive change," I finally said, keeping my tone neutral but not unkind. "It's never too late to redirect your path." "That's what I realized watching you work on the house," she replied. "You seemed so certain, so clear about your vision and value. I've never felt that way about anything." The conversation had veered into territory I hadn't anticipated and wasn't entirely comfortable navigating. Yet something about Amber's genuine struggle resonated with my own journey. Finding that certainty usually involves some difficult self-examination, I offered carefully, and often follows a painful catalyst. Neither process is particularly enjoyable, but both can be transformative. After we hung up, I sat contemplating the strange symmetry of the situation. The woman for whom David had been willing to sacrifice, our marriage was now questioning her choices, inspired in part by witnessing my post-divorce transformation. Life's circles of influence and impact were more complex than I'd ever imagined. The new year began with an unexpected invitation. The Portland Business Association's annual economic forecast breakfast wanted me to participate in a panel discussion about entrepreneurship and midlife career transitions. The event was one of the most prestigious business gatherings in the city, typically featuring established corporate leaders rather than newer entrepreneurs. "This is a major visibility opportunity," Tara emphasized when I hesitated. "The audience Includes every significant business leader, investor, and economic influencer in the Portland metro area. Participating elevates Mitchell Interiors from up-and-coming to established in one morning. I agreed to join the panel, spending several evenings preparing thoughtful responses to the moderator's preliminary questions. The topic: reinvention, personal and professional transformation in a changing economy, resonated deeply with my own experience, yet I wanted to ensure my contributions offered practical insights rather than just personal anecdotes. The morning of the event, I arrived early at the downtown hotel venue. The ballroom was set for several hundred attendees, with the panel stage positioned for maximum visibility. As I checked in at the registration table, I received my speaker's packet and name badge, along with a seat assignment at one of the VIP tables near the front. "The other panelists are already in the preparation room," the event coordinator informed me, directing me toward a door at the side of the ballroom. "Continental breakfast has been provided for speakers before the main event begins." I entered the preparation room to find 3 other panelists engaged in quiet conversation: the CEO of a regional bank, the founder of a successful technology startup, and the 4th panelist, sitting with his back to the door, whose identity became clear as he turned at my entrance. David. He looked as surprised to see me as I was to see him. For a moment, neither of us spoke, the awkwardness palpable enough that the other panelists glanced between us curiously. "Sarah," David recovered first, rising politely. "I didn't realize you were participating in the panel." "Likewise," I replied, maintaining professional composure as I greeted the other panelists. I hadn't seen the final participant list. The bank CEO, a perceptive woman in her 60s named Marianne Winters, assessed the situation quickly. "You two know each other, I gather." "We were married for 25 years, David explained with remarkable evenness. "The divorce was finalized recently." Marianne's eyebrows rose slightly, but her professional demeanor never wavered. "Well, that should make for an interesting perspective on reinvention, shouldn't it?" Her gentle humor broke the tension, allowing everyone to resume normal pre-event conversation. I selected a seat at the small conference table and accepted a cup of coffee from the refreshment station, using the routine activity to gather my thoughts. David had been invited to this panel because of the recent merger. His reinvention story presumably involved transitioning from independent financial advisor to corporate team member at Pearson Dynamics. Mine centered on building Mitchell Interiors from concept to award-winning firm in just over a year. 2 very different transformation narratives that had originated from the same broken marriage. The event moderator joined us shortly thereafter, reviewing the panel format and question sequence. An experienced business journalist, she immediately picked up on the connection between David and me. "This is an unexpected dynamic," she observed. "Would either of you prefer I avoid directing questions that might highlight your previous relationship?" "I'm comfortable addressing it professionally if it becomes relevant," I replied, appreciating her sensitivity. David nodded agreement. "As am I. Our respective professional transitions are validly part of the panel topic, regardless of the personal connection." The moderator seemed satisfied with our maturity, though I suspected she was also calculating how to tastefully incorporate this unexpected element into her questions for maximum audience engagement. As the ballroom filled with attendees, I reviewed my speaking notes one final time. Mitchell Interiors had reached a critical juncture, established enough to be recognized with awards and prestigious panel invitations, yet still new enough that each public appearance significantly shaped our market perception. My performance today would influence potential clients, possible investors, and business collaborators. The program began promptly at 7:30 with welcome remarks and introduction of the panelists. When my name was announced, I was pleased to hear genuine applause, confirmation that Mitchell Interiors had achieved meaningful recognition in Portland's business community. The panel discussion began with broad questions about economic trends, affecting each of our industries, then narrowed to our personal experiences with professional reinvention. The bank CEO described transitioning from government regulatory work to private financial leadership. The tech entrepreneur shared his journey from corporate employee to startup founder. When David's turn came, he spoke candidly about the challenges of merging his independent practice with a larger firm. After 20 years of being my own boss, adapting to corporate structure required significant adjustment, he acknowledged. I've had to redefine success beyond individual achievement to embrace team-oriented goals and collaborative decision-making. The moderator then turned to me. Sarah Mitchell, your reinvention story is perhaps the most dramatic on our panel. In just over a year, you've gone from beginning a new business to winning Emerging Enterprise of the Year. What catalyzed this remarkable transformation? I felt hundreds of eyes upon me, including David's. This was the moment to shape the narrative, to decide how much personal truth to incorporate into my professional story. Major life transitions often create space for reassessment, I began carefully. In my case, the end of a long marriage forced me to rediscover professional capabilities I had set aside years earlier. Many women of my generation interrupted career development to support family responsibilities. My particular challenge was reconnecting with those dormant skills and adapting them to current market realities. The moderator nodded encouragingly. You've mentioned in previous interviews that Mitchell Interiors was initially self-funded through the sale of a valuable collection. How did that unconventional startup approach influence your business development? This question treaded closer to sensitive territory. The watches had been a contentious issue in our divorce proceedings, though we had ultimately reached settlement. I glanced briefly at David, whose expression remained professionally neutral. Starting with significant capital rather than seeking external investment allowed me complete creative and strategic freedom, I explained. While many new businesses must compromise their vision to satisfy investor expectations, I could build Mitchell Interiors exactly as I believed it should function. That authentic foundation has proven invaluable as we've grown. The discussion continued, touching on mentorship, networking, and strategies for maintaining momentum during business transitions. Throughout, David and I maintained professional respect in our interactions, acknowledging each other's insights when relevant without forcing artificial collegiality. Near the end of the panel, the moderator posed what she clearly intended as her thought-provoking culminating question. Each of you has navigated significant professional change. What have you learned about yourself through that process that surprised you most? The bank CEO spoke of discovering leadership capabilities she hadn't recognized in herself. The tech entrepreneur mentioned developing resilience he hadn't known he possessed. David's answer was more reflective. I've learned that adapting to change reveals both strengths and weaknesses you might have missed in more stable circumstances, he said thoughtfully. In my case, I discovered I had defined myself too narrowly through individual achievement, rather than valuing collaborative growth. That limited perspective affected both my personal and professional life, something I understand more clearly now. His subtle acknowledgement of how his approach to success had impacted our marriage wasn't lost on me. When my turn came, I spoke with equal candor. I've learned that value is inherent, not assigned, I said, echoing the insight I had shared with Raymond months earlier. For years, I allowed external validation to determine my sense of worth, professionally and personally. The most surprising discovery was how quickly that perspective shifted once I began trusting my own assessment instead. Capabilities I had doubted flourished when I finally gave them space and confidence to develop. As the panel concluded and attendees began networking over coffee, several people approached to compliment Mitchell Interiors' work or express interest in potential collaboration. I exchanged business cards, scheduled follow-up conversations, and accepted congratulations on our recent award. all the normal activities of business development. I was speaking with a potential commercial client when I became aware of David standing nearby, waiting patiently for an opportunity to speak with me. When my conversation concluded, he stepped forward. "Your comments about inherent value versus assigned value resonated with me," he said quietly. "It made me realize how much I failed to recognize your capabilities during our marriage." The acknowledgement was unexpected, more personal than our recent interactions had been. "Thank you for saying that," I replied simply. He nodded, seeming to gather his thoughts before continuing. "The house sold yesterday. Final papers signed. New owners taking possession next month." He paused, then added, "Your staging made all the difference. The buyers mentioned it specifically in their offer letter." "I'm glad it worked out well," I said, unsure where this conversation was heading. "Sarah, He hesitated, uncharacteristically, uncertain. "I wanted to let you know that Amber and I are no longer together. That ended months ago." This information was surprising both in its content and in David's decision to share it with me. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, the polite response feeling inadequate but appropriate. "Don't be," he replied with a rueful smile. "It was never built on solid foundation. I think we both knew that from the beginning, but—" He trailed off, then continued with renewed resolve. "Anyway, I wanted to tell you that watching you rebuild your life this past year has been illuminating. Seeing you on this panel today, hearing how clearly you've defined your own value, it's made me reconsider many of my assumptions." I wasn't sure how to respond to this unexpectedly vulnerable communication. We were standing in a crowded business breakfast, surrounded by Portland's professional elite, having what felt like a deeply personal conversation disguised as casual networking. "Life rarely follows the paths we expect," I finally said. "Sometimes, the most painful detours lead to better destinations than we had planned." David nodded slowly. "You've certainly proven that true." He glanced around the room, then back to me. "You're exactly where you should be now, doing exactly what you should be doing. I can see that clearly." With that, he excused himself to speak with another attendee, leaving me to consider the strange evolution of our relationship, from husband and wife to antagonists in divorce proceedings to distant professional acquaintances who could acknowledge each other's growth with something approaching wisdom. As I drove from the event to the Mitchell Interiors showroom, I reflected on how completely my life had transformed in the 15 months since that devastating anniversary night. The woman who had sat alone at her dining room table, staring at her husband's text message and the untouched anniversary dinner, could never have imagined speaking on a prestigious business panel, leading a design firm with growing regional recognition, or feeling genuine equilibrium when conversing with the man who had betrayed her so thoroughly. That night, selling David's watches had seemed like an act of desperate self-preservation, my only available option for securing financial independence before he could leave me destitute. I couldn't have known then that this decisive action would catalyze not just economic security, but complete personal and professional reinvention. The watches that had been David's pride and passion had ultimately funded something far more valuable than his collection. They had purchased the opportunity for me to discover my own worth, to build something meaningful from my forgotten talents, and to create a life that reflected my authentic values rather than someone else's expectations. As I pulled into the parking space marked Sarah Mitchell Founder, I felt profound gratitude for the painful catalyst that had forced this journey of rediscovery. Without David's betrayal, without the necessity of fighting for my financial survival, I might never have found the courage to reclaim my deferred dreams or the confidence to build them into tangible reality. The timepieces that had once measured hours with such exquisite precision had, in their own way, helped me reclaim the most precious resource of all, the time to become fully myself. The Portland spring arrived with an explosion of cherry blossoms and new opportunities for Mitchell Interiors. Our work on the Green Living Development's South Waterfront project had garnered attention from regional architectural publications, leading to feature articles in Dwell Northwest and Sustainable Living. The publicity generated inquiries from commercial clients interested in our unique approach to balancing aesthetics with environmental responsibility. My team had grown to 15 full-time employees, including designers, project managers, procurement specialists, and administrative staff. The original showroom now served as our client meeting space, while actual operations had expanded to occupy the entire second floor of Raymond's building. Our growth had been so rapid that I occasionally found myself momentarily disoriented when entering our offices, surprised by the bustling professional environment that had evolved from my initial one-woman venture. On a particularly beautiful April morning, I arrived early to prepare for an important client presentation. The sunrise painted Portland's skyline in gentle pinks and golds, promising one of those perfect Northwest days that locals cherish after months of gray skies and persistent rain. As I unlocked the showroom door, I noticed an envelope that had been slipped underneath, my name handwritten on the front in elegant calligraphy. Inside was an invitation to the Portland Art Museum's annual fundraising gala, accompanied by a handwritten note from Eleanor Harper. Sarah, the museum board would be honored if you would consider joining our Arts and Design Committee. Your perspective on creating emotionally resonant spaces aligns perfectly with our mission to make art accessible to diverse audiences. Let's discuss over lunch next week. The invitation represented another significant milestone: recognition. Not just of Mitchell Interior's commercial success, but of my personal contribution to Portland's design community. The Art Museum's Design Committee included the city's most established architects, artists, and cultural influencers, people who shaped Portland's aesthetic identity through their vision and advocacy. As I placed the invitation on my desk, my phone buzzed with a text from Megan. "Have you seen the Business Journal this morning? Page 3. I quickly located the paper among our office subscriptions and turned to page 3. There it was, a small but significant announcement. Mitchell Financial Advisors, recently acquired by Pearson Dynamics, will relocate to Seattle effective June 1st. Former owner David Mitchell will transition to senior advisory role in Pearson's headquarters. David was leaving Portland. The news shouldn't have affected me. Our lives had diverged completely. Our marriage was long over. Our professional paths had crossed only occasionally since the divorce. Yet something about his impending departure felt like the closing of a significant chapter. Portland had been our shared home for decades. Soon, only I would remain, building my new life in the city where our old one had unfolded. Before I could process this news fully, Zoe arrived, energetically discussing our afternoon client presentation for a boutique hotel renovation. The day quickly filled with typical business activities: design reviews, vendor negotiations, team coordination meetings. But the knowledge of David's planned departure lingered at the edges of my awareness. That evening, I drove to my Selwood bungalow, now fully renovated according to my personal design vision. The transformation had been featured in Portland Home magazine, showcasing how thoughtful design choices could preserve a historic property's character while creating thoroughly contemporary living spaces. The article had generated several residential renovation projects for Mitchell Interiors, expanding our portfolio beyond commercial work and staging. As I prepared a simple dinner, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Ordinarily, I might have let it go to voicemail after business hours, but something prompted me to answer. Sarah Mitchell speaking. Sarah, it's David. His voice sounded different somehow, more hesitant than I remembered. I hope I'm not disturbing your evening. Not at all, I replied, curious about this unexpected contact. What can I do? For you? He paused briefly before responding. I imagine you've heard I'm relocating to Seattle. The move is happening rather quickly, and I find myself with a bit of a design dilemma. Another pause. I've purchased a condominium in a historic building downtown, but it needs significant updating to be functional for my needs. Several colleagues recommended Mitchell Interiors for the renovation. The irony wasn't lost on me. David seeking my professional design services after years of undervaluing my creative capabilities during our marriage. The universe did occasionally deliver perfect symmetry. "We could certainly review your project," I responded neutrally. "Zoe Winters handles most of our residential renovations now. I'd be happy to have her contact you to schedule a consultation." "Actually," David said, his voice gaining confidence, "I was hoping you might consider taking this project personally. Given that you're familiar with my preferences and work habits, it seemed potentially more efficient." Before I could respond, he quickly added, "I understand if that feels inappropriate given our history. Just thought it worth asking." I considered his request carefully. A year ago, I might have rejected it outright, the wounds still too fresh, for such intimate professional collaboration. But time and success had changed the emotional equation. I felt secure enough in my identity as a design professional to consider the project on its merits rather than through the lens of our past relationship. "Why don't you email the property details and your renovation goals?" I suggested, maintaining professional distance. "I'll review them and determine whether it's a project that makes sense for me to handle personally." David agreed readily, thanking me for considering his request. After we hung up, I sat with the strange feeling of our reversed positions. He, now seeking my professional expertise, acknowledging my capabilities in a way he never had during our marriage. The following morning, David's email arrived with comprehensive information about the Seattle property, a 1920s condominium in a recently restored building, featuring original architectural details but requiring significant updates to the kitchen, bathrooms, and technological infrastructure. His design preferences had evolved from the traditional styling of our former home to something more contemporary: clean lines, natural materials, and multifunctional spaces suited to both work and relaxation. Reviewing the materials, I realized the project aligned well with Mitchell Interiors' current direction. The historic preservation aspects would showcase our ability to honor architectural integrity while creating modern functionality. The Seattle location offered potential for geographic expansion, something I had been considering as our Portland market presence matured. After consulting with my management team about workflow and capacity, I decided to accept the project, not from any lingering emotional connection to David, but because it represented a valuable business opportunity and professional challenge. I called David to confirm our engagement, maintaining clear boundaries from the outset. "Mitchell Interiors would be pleased to handle your renovation. I'll oversee the project personally, but with appropriate team support. We'll need to schedule an initial site visit to assess the space firsthand before developing concepts." "Thank you, Sarah," he replied, sounding genuinely appreciative. "I value your willingness to consider this, given our complicated history." We arranged the Seattle site visit for the following week, coordinating with the property management company for access. I decided to bring Vincent with me. His background in architectural preservation would be valuable for assessing the historic elements worth retaining, and his presence would help maintain professional distance during my first face-to-face interaction with David since the business panel months earlier. The drive to Seattle gave me time to reflect on this unexpected development. Designing living space for my ex-husband would have seemed unimaginable during our divorce proceedings. Yet here I was, approaching the project with professional curiosity rather than emotional baggage. The woman who had once built her identity around being David Mitchell's wife was now secure enough in her separate identity to engage with him as a client rather than an adversary or former spouse. The Seattle condominium exceeded my expectations. Located in the historic Pioneer Square district, the building had been masterfully restored to preserve its early 20th century character while accommodating contemporary needs. David's unit occupied a corner position on the 6th floor, offering impressive views of Elliott Bay through original multi-paned windows. The interior featured exposed brick walls, hardwood floors hidden beneath worn carpet, and ceiling heights, uncommon in modern construction. "The bones are excellent," Vincent observed as we conducted our initial assessment. "These architectural details would cost a fortune to replicate today. All they need is proper restoration and highlighting." David arrived toward the end of our measurement and documentation process, giving us space to conduct our professional evaluation before engaging in client discussion. When he entered, I was struck by subtle changes in his appearance. He seemed simultaneously more relaxed and more focused, as if shedding his Portland identity had allowed him to recalibrate somehow. "What do you think?" he asked, genuine interest in his expression. "Can it become something special?" "It already is something special," I replied, gesturing toward the original crown moldings and window casings. "Our job will be uncovering and enhancing its inherent character while creating functionality for contemporary living." For the next hour, we walked through the space together, David explaining his lifestyle needs and preferences, while I noted potential design approaches. The interaction remained comfortably professional, focused entirely on the project rather than our shared history. Vincent contributed valuable insights about preservation techniques and structural considerations, his presence helping maintain the business-centered nature of our discussions. As we prepared to leave, David asked an unexpected question. "Would you consider having dinner before you return to Portland? Purely professional," he added quickly. "I'd like to show you a few restaurants in the neighborhood that capture design elements I find appealing." I hesitated briefly, assessing my comfort level with extending our interaction beyond the strictly necessary. After consideration, I agreed with a professional qualification. That would be helpful for understanding your aesthetic preferences. "Vincent, would you be able to join us as well?" The restaurant David selected featured adaptive reuse of an industrial space, exposed, mechanical systems juxtaposed with warm wood elements and strategic lighting that created intimate spaces within the open floor plan. Over dinner, our conversation remained focused on design preferences and project parameters, with Vincent contributing valuable technical perspective. "You're building something remarkable with Mitchell Interiors," David observed toward the end of the meal. "The way you've developed your distinct approach and assembled such a talented team in such a short time is impressive." "Thank you," I replied, accepting the compliment graciously. Finding the right team members has been critical to our growth. Vincent's expertise in historic preservation, for instance, adds dimension to projects like yours that I couldn't provide alone. As we prepared to leave, David handed me a small package wrapped in simple brown paper. "I found this while packing for the move," he explained. "It seemed like something you should have." Back at the hotel, I opened the package to find a small sketchbook I had completely forgotten, my design notebook from college, filled with interior concepts and space planning ideas from before I'd set aside my creative ambitions to support David's career. The pages contained the seeds of the design philosophy I had eventually developed at Mitchell Interiors, a vision I had deferred but never completely abandoned. Seeing these early sketches, some naive in execution but surprisingly aligned with my current aesthetic, brought a rush of complicated emotions. David had kept this notebook for decades, through multiple moves and life changes. Had he recognized the talent represented in those pages even while discouraging my professional development? Or had he simply packed it away without consideration, only to rediscover it during his current life transition? The notebook's return felt symbolic, the reclamation of not just my present capabilities, but the recognition of talents that had always existed, waiting for the opportunity to develop. I placed it on the hotel desk, a tangible reminder of the continuity between the young woman who had dreamed of creating beautiful spaces and the successful business owner who now did so daily. The following weeks brought intensive work on David's Seattle project, with my team developing comprehensive renovation plans that honored the building's historic character while creating living spaces aligned with his current lifestyle. Our concept preserved and enhanced original architectural features while introducing contemporary functionality through carefully integrated modern elements. The project progressed smoothly, our professional relationship with David remaining cordial and productive. He respected our design expertise, approved our concepts with minimal revisions, and maintained appropriate boundaries throughout our interactions. If he harbored any complicated feelings about engaging his ex-wife to design his new home, he kept them professional, concealed beneath client courtesy. As Mitchell Interiors approached its second anniversary, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary journey from desperate beginning to established success. The business that had started with the sale of David's watches now employed nearly 20 people, maintained a diverse client portfolio across residential and commercial sectors, and had been recognized with multiple industry awards. More importantly, it had become the vehicle through which I had reclaimed my professional identity and created a life aligned with my authentic values. The Seattle project neared completion as summer arrived in the Pacific Northwest. The transformation was remarkable. Original architectural elements carefully restored and highlighted, modern conveniences integrated with respect for historic's character, spaces designed for both functionality and emotional resonance. The final walkthrough with David was scheduled for a sunny July afternoon, marking the conclusion of our professional collaboration. As I entered the completed space, I felt genuine pride in what we had created. The condominium perfectly balanced preservation and innovation, respecting history while embracing contemporary living. David's expression as he moved through the transformed rooms confirmed we had successfully captured his vision while elevating it through our design expertise. "This exceeds my expectations," he acknowledged, examining the custom built-ins we had designed for his home office. "You've created exactly what I needed without my fully knowing what that was." "That's our specialty," I replied with professional satisfaction, revealing potential that was always present but perhaps not fully recognized. As we completed the final inspection and signed off on project documentation, David seemed to be considering something beyond the immediate business at hand. Finally, as I prepared to leave, he spoke with uncharacteristic directness. "When I asked you to take this project, I had an ulterior motive beyond getting excellent design services," he admitted. "I wanted to experience firsthand the professional capabilities I failed to value during our marriage. I needed to fully understand what I had dismissed." His candor caught me off guard. After a moment's consideration, I responded with equal honesty. "And what have you concluded from the experience?" "That I made a profound mistake in not supporting your creative development years ago," he said simply. "Both of us might have had very different lives if I had recognized your talents as worth nurturing rather than secondary to my own ambitions." The acknowledgement, coming after our business relationship was essentially concluded, felt sincere rather than strategic. David wasn't attempting reconciliation or seeking forgiveness. He was simply stating a truth he had come to recognize through our reversed professional dynamic. "We can't know what might have been," I replied after thoughtful consideration. "But I'm grateful for what is." Mitchell Interiors exists because circumstances forced me to reclaim dormant capabilities. Without that catalyst, painful as it was, I might never have discovered what I could build on my own foundation. As I drove back to Portland that evening, I reflected on the completion of this final circle in my relationship with David. The watches he had valued so highly had funded the business that had ultimately designed his new home. The wife whose creative talents he had overlooked had become the design professional he sought out by name. There was no bitterness in this recognition, only a sense of life's strange symmetry and the knowledge that sometimes our greatest growth emerges from our most painful experiences. The woman who had once defined herself primarily as David Mitchell's wife had become Sarah Mitchell, award-winning designer and successful entrepreneur, capable of engaging her former husband as a client rather than as an extension of his identity. Mitchell Interiors continued to flourish, expanding into the Seattle market with several new projects stemming from visibility gained through David's renovation. Our Portland operations became the headquarters for what was evolving into a regional, design firm with specialized expertise in sustainable commercial development and historic residential renovation. The watches that had once represented David's pride and my desperate gamble had multiplied in value beyond anything either of us could have imagined, not simply in financial terms, but in the creation of a business that transformed spaces and lives, including my own. Their true worth had never been in their mechanical precision or collector value, but in the future they ultimately funded, a future where I finally recognized and claimed the value that had always existed within me, waiting for the courage to emerge. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.